it's okay to be imperfect, but also know your boundaries and your ways of dealing with things, and make sure that you know
It's okay to change course too.
exactly.
The voice you just heard was one of my students from this past semester. Did she just say students? I sure did. This past year, I started teaching at Temple University, so while I'll always be MG the venue specialist, I'm really enjoying my role as Professor MG. As a project for my leadership and organizations class, the students paired up to record a short podcast about what they've enjoyed and learned in class so far, incorporating the role of emotional intelligence in their lives. With the students' permission to use their project for this season, I've broken each recording up into bite-sized clips. This week, I'm joined by Sarah Zero, founder and facilitator of Wellstruck, a supportive community for small business owners who lead with empathy. We'll listen to the clips and carry on the conversation started by Suzie and Samantha. If you're looking to gain insight into how much MG loves being a part of the Wellstruck community, you're in the right place. Thanks so much for listening, and enjoy the following episode, Entrepreneurship with Empathy 302. Don't be late to class! Class is back in session. I'm Professor MG, and I'm joined today by my friend Sarah Zero, who is the founder and facilitator of Wellstruck. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, thank you, MG. I'm really excited to be here. We always have good conversation.
We sure do. And I was thinking about it today in preparing for today's podcast. Do you realize you and I have only, we've known each other since November of 2019. That was when I attended my very first Wellstruck round table.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I have only been in the same space physically 2 times. And that's it. That
Oh my
was
gosh.
the in-person Wellstruck roundtable, and then our in-person meetup at Longwood Gardens. So, and I'm looking forward to our 3rd in-person meeting. I saw that in the Wellstruck community. And Wellstruck has been such a success for you that you've turned it into a podcast.
Exactly.
So Sarah, can you share with us a little bit about yourself and about Wellstruck?
Absolutely. So first, thank you for having me here. I really appreciate it. And yes, I'm the founder of Wellstruck, which is a community for small business owners, mostly women, whose values are rooted in empathy. It can be really difficult. It is really difficult to run a small business. It comes with lots of ups and downs. It's extremely fulfilling, and it can feel great to use your core zone of genius for amplifying good in the world. It's also really tough to do that. And so it's not only business challenges, but it's also the human challenges of the mental and emotional ups and downs. So I've created Wellstruck as a space for intimate events, and I have a membership community, and then I also curate intimate masterminds that are kind of like your own personal sounding board of peers who share similar core values and know exactly what it's like, what everybody's going through.
And what I find obviously 9 million things I find fascinating about Wellstruck, which is why I'm a part of the community. What I love is there are just so many different types of businesses represented within the community. So there are a lot of creatives. But there's hospitality and event folks like myself, life coaches, and folks like Amanda who will organize your life for you. And it's interior design. It's just a wide range, and somehow the unifying thing between all of us is that we're all experiencing similar things, maybe at different points. And so, bringing these, you always ask us for every Wellstruck meetup, is there something that a question you want to ask, something that you're struggling with? How can we support you today? And there's never a time that someone doesn't have an answer or a suggestion, or like, oh, I went through this last year, so here's my recommendation. And so everybody's got different lived experiences, but that's why you have a community that you can go to kind of work through this stuff. And it's been a really nice way to not feel so alone, because even as an entrepreneur, and specifically as a solopreneur, when you're working from home and you're by yourself, it gets lonely. And so, as quote unquote, zoomed out as we are, I do really, after every Wellstruck Zoom, after I sign off, I'm just refreshed and recharged and motivated and ready to go do the 9,000 things on my list that I've been pushing off. So
that's the best. That's the best compliment I could hear. Like, that means everything to me when people say that, because that's the goal. That's the whole goal.
You can use this podcast clip for your marketing purposes.
I will.
So in the spirit of entrepreneurship, the reason that I wanted to connect you with the students that I did today, they had started a business together and both like really exude an entrepreneurial spirit. So we're going to jump right into this first clip. This is Samantha and Suzie we'll be hearing from today.
Hi, and welcome to my very first podcast. My name's Suzie, and a little bit about me. I work full-time at a large city hospital. I work part-time on a 911 ambulance. I'm a full-time student and a business owner. I'm married with 4 kids, and I live for being busy. Don't get me wrong, I really do enjoy some downtime. I'm just addicted to making the most of my time, so I jam-pack most of my days. Today, I'm talking with Sam, my business partner and friend. We're going to chat about the importance of recognizing your personal limits, knowing it's okay to say no and set boundaries, and knowing how to be in tune and aware of your emotions to have the best outcome from people that you work with or manage. So let's start. Sam, can you say hi and tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. So, hi, I'm Samantha. Like Suzie, I have a very busy life. I am a stay-at-home mom to a very active and chaotic 6-year-old. I own 2 businesses. They keep me busy during the day, in my downtime. One of them is a travel agency, which I own partially with Suzie. And another one is my handmade apparel business, which actually is how I met you, Suzie. You had heard through a friend that I had made t-shirts and you needed some for your daughter's dance competition in Disney. And you reached out to me to make you some shirts, and then it's been good ever since.
Yeah, I think I was pretty much stuck on the stuff that you made. I found out that you had a whole website and a whole online shop, and the rest, I guess, is history because here I am. So, yeah, I mean, we started off, I just was one of your customers, actually, and then I guess that changed into, becoming really good friends.
That makes me think of something. With how busy you are, how do you do it? How do you manage your time? Because you're a superhero. How do you do it?
Well, thank you. I don't consider myself to be a superhero, whether it be a craft or a trip or homework. I just love having a jam-packed day. I'm not good at finding, chill. I'm often exhausted. I'm sorry. I drink a lot of coffee. You know this. A lot of time management, honestly. Scheduling with the kids, setting personal deadlines for myself. Life throws curveballs. This is my second go at my podcast. I'm lucky that Sam agreed to work on this with me. I had initially recorded one with one of my classmates, and technology in the iCloud ate it. Sam actually tried to help me recover it and went back through my computer, and it was gone. We were supposed to re-record, and then an unscheduled hospitalization happened in my world, and rather than get emotional, I figured out how I was going to fix it and overcome it, and here we are, making a new podcast to make up for the old one.
I will never forget getting these emails from Suzie because I think, had all my students upload their projects into Canvas, so I'm able to listen to them and grade them. And, I'm listening to her podcast and with her original one that she did, and it's off to an amazing start. And it's, classmate that she really enjoys working with. And about 4 minutes into it, you hear her scream, Ethan! And I think that's her husband. I think he came through the door. And so I guess she stopped the recording and then started the recording once again. And so that second recording wasn't uploaded into the system. All I had was just like that 4 minutes. And so she tried, sending emails back and forth of like, I'm trying to find it. I'm trying to get help to find it. And it didn't exist, and she was having a hard time getting a hold of the original classmate. So the other classmate was not actually like in my class. They just had a different class together. So I wasn't needing to grade the other student. And so, she's just losing her mind that, obviously she works 9 million hours a week. She has, a full class load on top of it. And, I gave her time and leeway to record a second episode, but it's like she still had to do the assignment and she knew it. She never once said like, I'll just take a 0, or she persevered, she got through it, and I really, really enjoyed gave her an outstanding grade for the work that she did with Samantha, because I think they did such a great job and they played very, very well off of each other and brought up some really excellent points that we're going to get into in this episode. So I'm sure that things like what happened to Suzie have absolutely happened to you in the past. It happens to all of us, especially as entrepreneurs, that these things fall apart, that we have to rebuild and we have to take a step back. So you keep yourself very busy. How do you do it? How do you do the 9 million things that you do? And also, if you'll share with our listeners, I know that you are also really good at boundaries, at least from like, an outsider's perspective. I feel like you're really good about kind of setting maybe certain time blocks for yourself for certain activities. You're really good about taking nature walks, which I did not fall in love with until COVID. Have a true appreciation for it. So, kind of share with our listeners your process for all of this.
Well, thank you for all of that. It's refreshing to hear that from the outside in, I look like I'm doing 9 million things and I have good boundaries and I'm organized. I really felt for her in that clip because actually, not quite as much work as losing a whole podcast episode, but just last week, for the first time in so long, I was writing the digest for Wellstruck from the whole last month. It's usually a weekly digest, but it was the whole last month because I had been out sick for a while. And it took me hours. It took me hours to do it. And I accidentally had the document open in 2 different windows. And I closed the one that had all of the text in it. And I left the other one that was open was from when I first opened it. And so it auto-saved. So I closed the one that had all the information on it. And then it auto-saved the one that was open that was blank. So I had to do all that work over again.
And listeners, so I get these weekly, in this case, it was a monthly digest. And so I was just letting Sarah know before recording, like how much work she put into it. Cause it's a huge recap of all the things that our community has shared with one another, celebrating each other's successes and wins, as small as we might think it seems. It is, we got to celebrate the small wins. And I've been there too. Like I get really frustrated if I like type out a huge Instagram post and then the words just like disappear. It just doesn't save correctly in my plan system. And I'm like, but
totally. And it hasn't happened to me in years because the way Google Docs are and the way things auto-save a lot of the time and they save versions, it's very unusual that would happen, but it happened to me and it was like a whole day's worth of work.
This makes so much more sense why it came out this week instead of, you're like, I need to walk away from this.
Oh, exactly. So to get back to that question, that was exactly what I had to do. And it's taken me years to learn this. But I said, well, shoot, like I'm completely drained. Now I'm super frustrated. And I decided, you know what? It's the end of the day. I am not going to work this evening on this. I'm going to step back, go drink a glass of wine, and I will come back to it next week. I'm not even going to tell people that it's delayed. Like nobody knew when it was coming out anyway. I'm not even going to like address it. I'm just going to do it next week when I have fresh face and mind. So yes, got to send that out this morning. But to answer your question about how I do 900 million things, first of all, I do a lot less than Suzie and Samantha
I think
do.
we all do. we absolutely all do.
Yeah. And I used to do a lot more, both in my personal life and even just business hours and being able to like have my brain be on all the time. And to dive into something serious and personal right off the bat, I actually I had cancer in 2018, and fortunately, I was able to. I had surgeries, and it's gone, and it's been gone since then. But one of the after effects that I don't often talk about, and I've just had to get used to in my life, is I only have 60 or 70% of the energy that I used to have. And so I work a lot less. And I constantly have to remind myself when I'm designing my day or my schedule that like I have to take more things off of it. That's actually, to be real transparent, that's been the hardest part of that whole. I mean, it's changed my life for the long haul. It's probably the top thing I talk about with my therapist is that like I waste my precious energy by being upset about the fact that I have less energy. But I'm working on that, and it's getting a lot better. And actually, I've learned some really good lessons from it, including the fact that when I consciously make space for rest and build in white space into my calendar or build in vacations, or just time off, I honor it. And when you really honor it and you truly step away from work, you actually, you know, things are going on in your subconscious too. And you can come back to the work and be fresher and more efficient. And I actually found that my therapist actually challenged me. She said, what would it look like instead of trying to work 6 or 8 hour days? What if you only worked half days? So like the first summer of COVID, I only worked from like 9 to 12 every day. And I spent the afternoons sitting in our neighborhood creek or sitting in my backyard with my feet in the kiddie pool, reading, walking, hiking. And I was so efficient that year. I was so efficient that summer. I think I got as much, if not more work in because I had less time to waste. So I was using it well. And also, yeah, my brain was refreshed. I had the blood flowing because I wasn't just sitting behind a computer screen all the time.
That's a picture perfect example of a work smarter, not harder.
Mm-hmm.
Which I kind of hate that phrase, but at the same time, you found a system that works for you, and that's something that's so beneficial to being an entrepreneur. Is you set your own schedule, you set your own boundaries. That So now, how has your schedule kind of evolved? Let's say, like, what has 2022 looked like for you in terms of like your schedule and how you kind of set your week up?
Yeah. So I am very conscious about, I don't schedule meetings on Mondays or Fridays because if I need to shorten the week for some reason, like if my energy is just not there that week, um, I have space to rest if I need to. But also, I find that by having 2 days on the calendar a week when there are no meetings, that I don't have to show up for anyone else. I'm showing up to do the work that I know I need to get done with no interruptions. I can get totally lost in that work. And so that's been important to me. And I will admit that I'm working more than I probably should for my energy now. And I've actually been thinking a lot about that. In fact, my partner even mentioned it recently. You're pushing yourself too hard. You're trying to cram in too much. So it's been a good reminder, and conversations like this are a good reminder that, I don't want to miss that daily walk. I really need that daily walk for my mental health, physical health, energy, all of that. And like, it's super important to get that in. So I'm trying to anchor that habit again and practice only having like two things on my work to do list every day. So I'm trying to get back to that.
Well, this is a perfect segue into our next clip because the topic is actually self-awareness.
Okay.
Back to the travel agency, honestly, you are really like the leader there. You also are the owner and operator of the clothing company, and that's got to get tough. How do you keep yourself like a self-aware? Like, what do you do to keep your emotions in check? Like, it has to be overwhelming. We just came out of a pandemic. You own two businesses.
It is. It's very overwhelming. The pandemic definitely hurt both of the businesses. Nobody was traveling. People were trying to conserve money, so nobody's buying clothing. And it gets emotional at times, and especially when you deal with customers, you have to stay professional. You have to keep your emotions in check. So I like to, sometimes I'll journal, I'll write down my thoughts, even if it's random words on a piece of paper. That's just enough to get it out. I step away from my work for a little bit. I go do something else, something that makes me relax and calm. And that's okay. It's okay to walk away from something to give yourself time. And a lot of times you end up coming back 10 times better and,
Yeah, stronger.
and stronger and completing the work because you need a break. Everybody needs a break. And it's okay to take a break. And I think that's some issues that people have. They think that they can't take a break, but you can.
It's actually funny you're saying that because you're pretty familiar with my personality.
Yes.
You've had to tell me how many times to tell my kids no, or to tell somebody, no, I'm not making you that, or no, I'm not doing that for you, because I struggle sometimes with an overly full schedule. And
Mhm. You have to set those boundaries for yourself too, for your own peace of mind.
how do you do that? How do you, personally, how do you, like if Renee is asking you for something and you don't feel like you can do it, or even more so, one of your customers, if somebody contacts you and said, hey, I want you to make me this dress by this time. I mean, the business is important, but what do what do you do if you really don't feel like you can manage?
It's hard for sure. And I think the best way I can do it is I can look at everything I have to do, and if I can find a spot to fit that in, I'm going to do it because obviously I want to make my customers happy. I want them to be repeat customers. And sometimes that may be saying no to something else, something as simple as we need to do this tonight, and I'm going to have to say it's going to have to hold off till tomorrow. It's prioritizing. It's 100% prioritizing. And also learning to say no to things. If you aren't able to do something, you need to be able to say, I'm really sorry, I can't right now. As a business owner, as a person, as a parent, making sure that you are constantly keeping yourself in check and knowing how far you can push yourself and where your boundaries are, and motivation from yourself too. Self motivation is a huge part of it.
I think we both feel very seen by everything Sam just shared in this last clip.
Absolutely.
I feel like we already kind of touched on this a lot in the last segment. So probably like the biggest question I would ask you, how did you learn to say no? I can assume, at least for me, I feel like it was an ongoing journey, but it was an easier thing to do once I owned my own business. Versus working for somebody else. So, and I know with Wellstruck, it's had so many different variations since its inception. because I guess you've worked for yourself for a really long time. So, can you recall like that kind of pivotal moment of like when you're like, okay, the power of no is in me. I've got this.
Yeah, yes, I can relate to you in that it wasn't necessarily one moment, but it happened gradually over time. I mean, going all the way back to college, I went to school for design. I majored in visual communications, and the studio environment was such that people would pull all-nighters all the time. I don't know if I ever pulled an all-nighter. I always felt like my sleep was more important than like anything else. Um, and I mean, I needed the sleep to be creative. And I knew that if I could go to sleep and at least get a few hours in, that I could wake up and be more on the next day. So I think in my business, I've been working for myself full time since 2013. My business actually started off as a branding business. I did one on one work doing brand strategy and brand design for clients. And I had started getting to the point where I had systemized everything as much as I could. I had the client waiting list and I was looking at like, okay, I feel like I'm working still way too hard for what I'm getting paid.
Hmm.
And it's not easy to scale a one-on-one business unless I want to take on employees, which I didn't feel so comfortable doing. Um, I just didn't want the pressure of that, the stress of that. I knew that would weigh heavily on me. And I had been doing these Wellstruck events on the side as a passion project. Once a month, I would just host one of these events. And I started to notice that that was my favorite 2 hours of every month. And around that time, when this started to become really clear to me, is when 2018 hit. And that's when I had the year that I was out because of my cancer. And so naturally, I began to zoom out and look at the big picture of my life and what I wanted out of it. And just like I had decided when I left college and I was applying for jobs, I opted not to go to New York and do the hustle and bustle of a super cool, tiny little agency working on like the hot and hip clients. I chose the job that came with more vacation time and that ended at 5 p.m. and started in the morning. And that didn't mean that I didn't love my work or want to do great work. I was passionate about it, but I just knew that what I want for my life is a different version of success. I think everybody deserves joy. That's a core value that shows up a lot in Wellstruck. And I try to build my life around that so that I get to have fun and enjoy my life and enjoy my time off while also building my business. So I did a lot of self-reflection on what I really thought my core genius was. What's the thing that comes naturally to me, I'm really good at. In fact, zone of genius, I think it's usually something that you don't even realize you're good at and other people don't have it because it comes so naturally to you and you really enjoy it. And I realized at that point that my design work, I was really good at it, but I had to work really, really hard at it. So that would be defined as my zone of excellence, not my zone of genius. And I also was thinking about just legacy, which can sound morbid sometimes, but like I
But what you
really,
went through in 2018 makes sense as well.
yeah, absolutely. But as cliche as it might sound, I wanted to do the most good that I can, especially 2018 is when, my eyes were opened in so many ways to so many things, um, that I really wanted to figure out how I could do the most good with the skills that I have. Um, and that was community building and amplifying the work of other people who are doing good in the world in ways big or small. And for me, that was supporting other small business owners and not just any small business owners, but small business owners, again, whose values are rooted in empathy, who believe in the power of fresh perspectives and diverse perspectives. And so, even if you are, I don't know, making widgets that don't seem to change the world when you're looking at it on the outside, it might be the way that you weave your values into your business and show up as a leader who leads with empathy, who creates a good space for your employees, and just finds ways to align core values with their actions and the work that they do. And so I got really excited about this because I had already been doing these monthly events and I had quite a community built up already, but it wasn't a membership community. And so I redesigned my business. I pivoted. I decided to build my business around those things of wanting to live my life, wanting to have a little bit more ability to scale and create systems and processes in a way that I didn't have to work so hard all the time. And building a community is a beautiful thing, because when it's a true community, the members of the community have relationships with each other, not just relationships between me and them. And so the power and the value that they're getting out of it is also from each other. It's not 100% dependent on me and my presence, which actually came into play last month when I had COVID twice in a row after avoiding it for 2.5 years, and it knocked me out for weeks. A lot of members said that they didn't, respectfully, didn't even really notice that I wasn't in the online community during that time, because I've built it in a way that I can sort of disappear for little bits of time and swoop back in when things are better. So that's my long answer to how I've what was the original question? Setting boundaries, self-motivation.
The question was, how did you learn how to say no? But it was still a very fascinating answer.
Oh my gosh.
But I think the way that you explained kind of like this evolution, it kind of goes in line with how you set boundaries for yourself. So I guess the kind of question was it an evolution of learning how to say no versus like this happened?
Yes, actually, you just helped me bring it full circle, because where I was going with that is I built a business that revolves around the life I want, so that it's easy for me to say no, and so that I've set myself up for a position where I don't even have to say no all the time, because my business is designed in a way that protects me and my energy.
And you're so respectful of other people's time as well. I love, what do you have in your signature? It's like, if you are receiving this email outside of your regular business hours, please don't respond until you're back at your computer. I think it's so lovely that it's, like you're just kind of addressing boundaries in your own way. And one of the things that I've loved too is, I walked in one of the main reasons I signed up again for 2022 to be a part of the community is because I wasn't really sure what this year was going to look like. I knew I was going to start teaching in the spring at Temple. I was going to keep moving forward with MG, the venue specialist, but I just didn't really know what direction anything was going to go. And at least I could have some sort of like backbone of a community to show up to once a month and be present in the online community. And so it's been so helpful, because even though now I am moving in the direction of academia, I was able to get, 4 wonderful women from the Wellstruck community to come out and speak to my leadership course. And so, also to have, ideas that I can bounce off of for, my classes and my lessons and my projects. And, what do y'all think of this? That it's nice that I've already built up this community and people whose opinions that I trust, that even though I'm not asking them questions about my business, it's still, the context still resonates with the community from the perspective, from the perspective of academia. So, again, just I feel like the title of this episode is going to be like a love note to Wellstruck. The last question I'll ask on this topic, I am curious from a personal standpoint, were you already thinking about creating like memberships and a tiered community prior to 2020? Was this already kind of like poking around in your head, or because the previous format that I was introduced to were just once a month roundtables where it was capped at 12 people because we were meeting in person. There was a guest speaker. And so the one I attended, it was actually Hillary Ray, who I was already friends with and was a guest on season 2 of the podcast. It was such a great experience. And then, March of 2020. So I was just curious if it was a forced pivot of like, okay, what am I going to do next? Or had that already been brewing in your mind?
Great question. I had definitely thought about it before, but had trouble seeing how to turn it into a business model, from a financial standpoint. I hadn't wrapped my head around that yet. And then the other reason I had been thinking about it is, and this kind of ties back into my brand strategy. And when you're creating a business, you don't just create a business because it's what you want to do, but it also needs to fulfill a need. And these events were selling out and people were asking for more. People were asking if I would do a conference or host a mastermind, or what more could they do? What was the next level? And so when the demand was there, it definitely got my wheels turning.
All right. Well, we are going to jump right into the next clip, overcoming challenges.
We talk a lot about emotional intelligence, and that is, being in check. It's even if you have a rough day, I've recently took a promotion at work, and even with everything going on in life, it's making sure I don't have an argument with Ethan or blame him for losing my old podcast and then go to work and take it out on my, employees, because it's not their fault. And you can't manage successfully or manage people successfully if that's how you're reacting to things. So it's, kind of being self-aware, I believe. If you don't take that time and make that time or think about it from, the right perspective, sometimes it's anxiety provoking. And
Yeah.
I know the past year, 2 years, I don't know, since COVID reared its ugly head, working during a pandemic or being anxious about, sales during a pandemic or booking travel during a pandemic. It's
hard to find the right headspace.
Yeah. I have ADHD. Everybody knows that. It makes certain things harder, but I think that, understanding that the emotional intelligence, the being in the right spot at the, and handling yourself. I think if I was taught that at a younger age and how to manage it, I think I would have been more successful.
Despite all the challenges, ADHD, full schedule, like how do you motivate yourself? What are your motivators?
Typically the night before, so at work, when I know that it's a busy day where I'm going to be at work at 6 a.m., leave work and go right to school, leave school, go right to pick up the kids, and then repeat. I don't know what I would do if I did not take notes. I have Post-it notes. I should have bought stock in Post-it notes because you've seen it. I have them stuck everywhere. I stick Post-it notes to my phone, to my dashboard, to my computer screen. I stuck one to Frankie one day so I wouldn't forget something that she needed for school, because writing little notes to myself, that's how I get by. I started with the no snooze button, and that's like a rule I have now, no snooze. So for me, that planning, I need to have a plan. I don't know how people do things where they are willy-nilly.
On a whim.
I could not do that. I mean, you know it.
Yeah.
About me. I need to have a plan, a time, a location, and a confirmation, because that's just how I operate.
How you operate, yeah.
I don't like surprise. I don't like the unknown.
I hear you on that one.
I feel like this clip is just a prime example how every human operates so differently, and you have to find a system that works for you. When I was first listening to this clip, I'm like, no snooze button. Forget that. That would But also my dog Briscoe, it depends on the morning, but sometimes he's like, excuse me, mom, your alarm went off. Like it is now time to get up and start the day. So sometimes he leaves me no choice, but I am definitely a snoozer for sure. And, to have post-it notes everywhere like that, I need everything to live in like specific spaces. So I have, this is a constant question that'll come up in the Wellstruck community is like, do you have a task management system or things like that? So, for me, I like to get out a bag of markers and make like these big colorful lists and then take that list and put them in the places they need to go. Do I need to put it in my, any dot do task manager app with a specific, day and time that will remind me that, okay, you need to do this at this day and time? Or is it going to go in my balance bound planner? Shout out to Brooke, fellow Wellstrucker. Where does it need to live? But if to have things scattered about, but also I don't work 9 jobs and have 4 children. So it's just different
Seriously.
folks, different strokes. What motivates you? There's 2020 was a huge struggle to just get out of bed some days and to not, giving yourself the space to like, okay, I'm going to binge watch the entire series of Queer Eye because I am just kind of having a panic attack today of everything that's going on. So, what kind of keeps you motivated? What kind of keeps you on track? Because I feel like we have definitely discussed that you definitely know when to walk away, when to give yourself rest. So what keeps you going?
That's a great question. What keeps me going? Well, a little background on me. I definitely experience anxiety and depression. And I didn't even realize that till I was an adult, but it's probably been going on my whole life. And so I've worked through some strategies for tools, affirmations, self-help books to learn how to snap out of that funk or motivate myself, because that is a challenge for me. In fact, I used to have a lot of shame about that, and I was afraid that there was no such thing as an entrepreneur or a small business owner who had anxiety or depression. And oh my gosh, was I wrong? We all do. We all do.
We all do.
We all do. There's like it's like a huge percentage of, yes. So one thing that I do, and actually my mom taught me this mantra. She says, first thing in the morning, get your machines working for you. So if you're privileged enough to have machines in your house, such as a washer and dryer, a dishwasher, or a robot vacuum, or whatever it may be, first thing in the morning, that's my focus. When I have my ish together, I'm on top of that. And so no matter how sluggish I'm feeling, it's like, okay, right off the bat, like I'm working efficiently, because by the time I'm up for half an hour, I have these things in motion. And that just feels good. And it feels like, oh my gosh, I'm banging things out. So that's something that plays often in my head. Additionally, I recently read a book that I've recommended to everyone I know, entrepreneurs and traditional work folks alike. It's called Set Boundaries, Find Peace by Nidra Glover-Tawwab. And it is such a wonderful reference book. I know we've kind of already touched on boundaries, but I think it really ties into this question as well. Because while I'm good at setting boundaries for my business, I'm not good at setting boundaries with myself. In other words, things like hitting the snooze button, or 10 more minutes of TV, or, getting up to do the laundry instead of working on something else. And so she has chapters dedicated to different types of relationships. And the first one that she focuses on is your relationship with yourself. Can you keep your own rules and timelines for yourself. So let's be real clear. This is one of my weaknesses, and I'm always working on it. I'm certainly not perfect with boundaries. And one affirmation that I believe I got from her book is little by little, I can keep small promises to myself. And I literally have this on a post-it on my bathroom mirror and on my desk. And I will even say it. So, like, if I set timers for myself all the time, like, okay, I'm going to just sit down and have a 1 hour break. When that 1 hour goes off, if I want to hit snooze, I'll literally say out loud, little by little, I can keep small promises to myself. And I get up off the couch. I've fallen out of that a little bit in recent weeks, but I've picked back up on it, and it really does make a difference. So I can't recommend the book enough, because she not only talks about boundaries, she gives you like actual lines you can say to people in a respectful manner to protect yourself or say to yourself, and ideas for boundaries that you might not even realize you're not respecting for your own self. So that's my reaction to the question about sticking to my own schedule, self-motivation. Is that where we started with this one?
Absolutely. And for me, I love a deadline. I absolutely love a hard deadline that this needs. And I think that that's one of the reasons Daniela and I operate so well together as host and producer, that, we give each other deadlines, but also give each other, grace.
Yeah.
Life is life. So, we have our deadlines, and if we're a day late, that's fine. But at least like we mentally know that like XYZ needs to be done by this date, this time. And I operate so much better when I know that there's a deadline. And I also, there was a TED talk. I can't remember who it is. I should, probably look it up to reference. But a TED talk that I had shown to my leadership class, that he spoke about procrastination actually can be a good thing for several people. That I know for me, because I like love deadlines so much, that procrastinating to get closer to the deadline helps me have this explosion of creativity of, the ideas just kind of come pouring out, that maybe I'll like start working on something, maybe get about like a third of the way there, and it's like, all right, time to walk away from this and come back as we get closer to the deadline. And it's just some sort of magical rush of everything that I needed to say, everything that I wanted to say. And obviously it's a lot better when you're working in Google Docs and it doesn't disappear on you. You're working in a different platform. But that's kind of what, deadlines help to motivate me. So well, let's jump into our final clip regarding leadership mentality on adjusting to change.
And I guess even with trainings that we've done, it might be brought up like, hey, we have a training to do for the travel agency. And if you post something, we have like a specific, Facebook group for our travel agents. And if Sam perhaps posts something about, hey, we have an upcoming training, I almost immediately get anxious until I know when it is, because I know that I need to be able to schedule it.
Yeah.
And Sam, you've always been kind of like our training person. Does that get you motivated? Like, do you enjoy that side of it?
So I also too am like a planner. Maybe not as rigid as you are.
Rigid.
But I think it's good to be planning and organized. And we're recently talking about motivating and self-motivating, and how stress and anxiety can really take a toll on our entire day. And I just want to touch back on that real quick, because you had said you leave yourself motivational notes. Something my dad had once told me, and I kind of just really stick with it, is that if it's not going to matter in 5 years, don't spend more than 5 minutes, upset or worrying about it. And I think that's a really good mentality in leadership, because there's a lot of things that are not going to go your way. And um in like what you're saying about the trainings and stuff, if I post a date and a time and you can't make it work, neither one of us can get upset about that. We find other ways to cope with it. Like, for instance, recording the training so that you can reflect back on it later on when you do have the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about finding those alternatives to the problems, finding those solutions, and not spending too much time in the moment of, poor me, I can't get this done, but spending the time in, this is how I can make it work.
Yeah. And something that I think is also important, we've talked about ADHD and we've talked about anxiety, and we've talked about, the pandemic and, making things work and not stressing about them. I think something that like really taught me was, during the pandemic, I was very anxious, and me jam packing my days. It's FOMO. I don't want to
Yeah.
miss something. I don't want to let somebody down. I think that's why. Thank you for never judging any of that, obviously.
Of course, that's what friends are for.
But I mean, I just thought that was huge. I don't know how people managed. I mean, I'm in healthcare, and it was trying.
It was definitely hard, and it's a learning experience, though. You learn from it.
Being a mom and a business owner and a student and a friend and a softball coach and an EMT and whatever else is on that list. But being a person and having faults and having, anxiety about life and everything, it's all very real. And I don't think that there's always that time to have that real talk with a real person like myself, like you.
From one thing I'm definitely taking away from this podcast is the realization that, we need to make time for ourselves. We need time to breathe. We need time to cope with things. We need time to motivate ourselves. And I think those are all really good takeaways. So I think if anybody takes anything away from this podcast, I hope that it's that it's okay to be imperfect, but also know your boundaries and your ways of dealing with things, and make sure that,
it's okay to change course too.
Exactly.
It's okay.
If something's not working, it's okay. I'm not going to say to quit, but it's okay to not be okay.
If that's not the theme of life, it's okay to not be okay. How many times do we have to tell ourselves, especially, I feel like that was just the theme of 2020, of just reminding one another, and mostly important, saying that in the mirror, that reminding ourselves that it is okay to not be okay. And, I just really appreciated how they touched on, don't just, if something's not working or something's not going right, complaining about it and not taking action. Like, I feel like that frustrates me when I see that in other people, that they're not working to, like, specifically, like with me, like if I'm not happy in a situation, okay, how do what can I do to change this? I'm left my job at the end of 2018 to self-reflect and figure out like my what's next, come up with MG, the venue specialist. Not okay in 2020. And, it's just a business that's, no longer bringing me income. It's not serving me. And so, making the change into academia. So it's just trying to move past that and kind of like mourn the loss of this business that I created. So, Sarah, what were kind of like some of your thoughts and takeaways of like this final clip?
It's okay not to be okay. I feel like I haven't learned this more until recent years. I do know one thing that really resonated with me from that clip is like having real conversations or being real. It's okay to be real. And I know you've mentioned that that's one of the things that is really important, and I think like a cornerstone again of Wellstruck. Sorry, I keep bringing it back to business. How can I not? Um, since we have that in common, um, it really is. And actually, sometimes when I'm describing the kinds of conversations that we have, I fear that outsiders might hear, "Oh gosh, it's just a place where they're all not okay together." That doesn't sound that doesn't sound fun or productive. But it couldn't be further from the truth. There is something magical that happens when you come together in a space that feels safe and everybody is asked to share a challenge or a vulnerability. Um, you suddenly build trust because everybody has a little bit of skin in the game. And the magic that happens is you realize, oh, holy cow, I'm not the only one feeling this way. I think one of the biggest problems with not being okay is the shame around it. I just finished Brene Brown's Dare to Lead book. It's so good. She
Yeah,
talks
you
so much about
recommended
this.
doing it as an audiobook, so I definitely need to jump on that.
Oh gosh, yeah, she's so good. And so much of what she talks about is shame and feeling like there's something wrong with you. And that takes a ton of energy. It sucks a ton of energy to feel like, oh my gosh, I don't have my I'm a total mess compared to everybody else. But once you hear some of the things that other people are struggling with, not that you're happy that they're struggling, it's just that you realize, oh, like none of us know what we're doing all the time, no matter what stage of business, no matter what kind of business, or no matter what human experience it is. Like none of us were okay in 2020, and that didn't make you, an outsider. In fact, we all felt it together, and figured out how to deal with it together and gave each other grace. And that's where that empathy can come into play too. That's why empathy is so important to me.
I think I shared this with you in one of our conversations that early on in the spring semester, I did an empathy exercise with my leadership students.
mm,
And I asked them, what's one thing that like causes you fear or anxiety that you really don't share with people? And I had them anonymously write them on an index card, and myself included, and collected all of the index cards. And this is a class of 35 students, and read the cards aloud for the class. And I think this was week 3 that I did it. I think we did first 2 weeks in Zoom, week 3 in person. And the vulnerability that these students showed up with, that I explained to my friends that I feel like if a professor would have done this, 20 years ago when I was at Drexel, you would have had some very childish answers, versus these were real, love, family, friendships, mental health, the state of the world, will I ever be loved? And, they really put their fears and anxieties in these cards. But hearing that 35 other people that they're surrounded by, including their professor, like the overlap was so strong. And I really appreciated, so part of their like reflection paper that they would later write about that, it's like, kind of let me know what that experience was like for you. And I know that they all really appreciated it because, you know, empathy is huge, and it is just so necessary for us to be empathetic, because it is an awful time in our in the universe. It's an awful time in history. And we have to take the time to understand one another, but also know that we're not alone in our fears and anxieties. And I love that empathy is just such a strong core value of Wellstruck, because it's at you have built a community where no one feels alone.
yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because as I was growing up, I think my empathy, I often felt like it was a weakness of mine. I grew up with I was the only girl in a family of guys, and it was seen as, being emotional or being weak, maybe. And things have evolved, and I've had more experiences now, and also through therapy, I've realized that there's actually so much strength and empathy,
And
and
strength and
feeling.
vulnerability. Thank you, Brene Brown, again.
Exactly. Yes. Courage, courage, courage. And so I've learned to embrace that and lean into that as actually one of my superpowers, or one of the things I'm really good at. Is, I'll share vulnerably, because that's also a way to inspire others or make others feel safe in being vulnerable. You know, it's funny. If you meet somebody who acts like they're perfect all the time, or not acts like they're perfect, tries to appear perfect all the time and never admits to vulnerabilities or never shares vulnerably, they're the odd ones out because
Mhm.
nobody can relate to them. You become so much more approachable when and you can connect on a deeper level when you're courageous enough to share those kinds of things.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for sharing everything that you shared with us and our listeners today. Your vulnerability was absolutely beautiful, and I really appreciated it. This was a really wonderful conversation. So thank you, Sarah. I also want to thank Samantha and Suzie. They did a wonderful job with their podcast recording. And most importantly, listeners, thank you so much for tuning in today. Follow Beyond the Venue podcast on Instagram, and also check us out on all of your favorite podcast streaming platforms. Have a great rest of your day.
This is a Bivesta production.